Nice to see everyone. I'm calling your meeting to order. It is 6:31. We first have our consent agenda, which includes a number of policies as well as the prior minutes. Any questions or discussion about either minutes or policy? I had a question. The library media specialist, I was just curious, is this one person who serves in this capacity for the whole SU, or is this the librarian sometimes, one and the same?
It's the same, that's the title of librarian, it's formally as library media specialist.
Okay, oh, okay, they're not two separate
No.
skill sets. Okay. And then there was one typo on this, one of the policies on C1, the recognition, just trying to get there, of visitors. 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph down with the implementation, that should be a capital R for rules.
All right. Good catch.
And I think that was my, oh, and then I just had another question. I was curious about this freedom to read, and whether this is all our language, or this is something that we adopted from.
This is actually, I believe it is I asked about this as well, and this is something that came from Lisa, do you remember? National Library,
I don't remember.
it's one of the library groups.
Well, so it says here, like Appendix A, the Library Bill of Rights, that one is in brackets,
American Library
brackets made
Association.
available by permission of the American Library Association. It was just less clear to me whether that applies to Appendix B, Freedom to Read as well, that same
I
organization.
believe it does, but we should cite that, because it's a separate appendix.
Right,
So we need a citation there.
okay,
This was definitely not something that our library group came up with. This came out of
okay,
the national
understood.
organization.
Okay, great. Any other discussion, questions about minutes or policy? Okay, so I'll make a motion then to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that, actually, we don't need to do it by roll, eh? Because we're all here in the same, what's that?
You're all present.
It's been a while since.
I
we've
know,
done
I
that.
mean, I can't remember the last
Yeah.
time I didn't have to do it by roll. Okay,
Great.
so, all in favor, say, I'm like, how did we used to do it
Yeah.
before I did it by roll? That's how long it's been. So the motion on the table is to accept the consent agenda. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, sweet. Is that how we used to do it?
Yes,
Yes?
very well done.
That's
Yes.
amazing how, that's so far back in the rearview mirror. Okay, I see a lot of visitors or in the virtual realm, no one in person. Morgan, any of the people in the waiting room, or rather watching us virtually, want to contribute and talk?
I think they're having a hard time hearing us. I've gotten a couple of chats saying that they can't really hear us.
Okay, and while we do that, I forgot, we are going to reprioritize the flow of the meeting tonight.
Yes.
So, apologies for overlooking that. We are going to do the superintendent's report first.
I would like to do a
First,
piece
a
of
piece
mine
of it.
first, under personnel.
Yeah. I'm gonna move on then
Yes.
and assume they're just observing. So that brings us to Lynn.
Okay, so I have something under personnel that I'm gonna ask the board to move into executive session for.
Okay, I will make the motion to move into executive session at 6:43. We'll do that by roll. Erin?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Lisa?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye.
So we're gonna have to put most of the Zoom people into a waiting room.
Yeah.
And leave it open, the meeting open for Erin
Okay,
to participate.
that sounds good. And I'm gonna make a motion to accept the resignation of Jessica Ox. And we'll do that by roll. Erin?
Aye.
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye. Okay, so moving on, Morgan, you're up with the budget discussion.
All right. So Courtney is gonna pull up the presentation. It's the same one you've seen the last couple of times, and I will keep updating that. Don't think I had any action on current year budget. I will tell you that since I put out the report, we got the tuition bill from Maple Run, which I'll send out to you in the next couple of days. And so with that in our pocket, I can confidently say that we're gonna be under budget this year in terms of tuition kids, unless something dramatic happens, a bunch of people move in. At this point, I would say it could be as high as $500,000 from what we budgeted. Not really seen all the tech tuition bills yet, but I don't anticipate that's gonna be very different from what we budgeted, because that one never is. You can pull up, yep, that's ready to go. And the only other update is that we did receive the first draft of the SU audit, so I expect the district's ones will be dropping pretty soon. I obviously haven't seen it yet. I've been tipped that there's, they're not expecting to have any issues on the NMV side, so I think that will be a riveting document, as it always is, but not much to worry about there. So you can go to the next slide. This again is kind of a prototype of what we could be using at your annual meeting on the 22nd of February. We were at our second board meeting. The only real change from the first one is that the tax commissioner did propose a yield rate, as he's required to do by statute. It came in higher than last year, which is good news for the tax rate, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation. Before we meet in January, we should have a pretty final number of equalized pupils and then the CLA figures, and that will be all of the factors that are not in your control in terms of setting a tax rate. Go to the next one. The general budget objectives haven't changed anything since the last meeting. Go on. Additional considerations, I have tweaked this one a little bit. We had talked about all of these, except for the yield rate at your last meeting. The transportation contract is due back, I think, December 21st, and we have an SU meeting December 22nd. And so at that meeting, I'm hoping to have a solid number there. Right now, that's the biggest unknown on the SU budget, which will impact your assessment. So the yield rate of 15,479 means that more money is raised for each dollar of tax. So the number previously was, I think, 13,000 and change. $13,314. So it's about a $2,000 increase. Last year when we were talking about the yield, it was around $150 on the yield, changed your tax rate by a penny. So that's a pretty big move if we're able to hold everything else the same. That number is not final. That's set by the legislature probably in May or June. But I think at this point, we don't think it'll stray too far from the tax commissioner's proposal, and I believe that we will all be using that number to warn budgets come spring. Next slide. So these are the enrollment figures, no change. again, our two little schools relatively flat. Berkshire's been seeing a decline recently, and so that's projected out. And then some rather large increases at Sheldon. Everything to the left of 2002 is real numbers, and everything to the right are projections. Next. In terms of expenses, I don't know that we knew about the dental insurance increase when we last met, so that is an increase of 2%, which is not bad compared to some of those other numbers up there. Multi-line, which is sort of the other insurances, buildings, cars, liability, they're anticipating an increase of about 7%. And then in terms of high school students, you've got 85 eighth graders as of October 1st, and so far we've received 48 tuition bills for graduating seniors. So it isn't likely going to be a 30 kid increase, because some of those 85 will find out have parents in the town that they're going to school in. But it is an anticipated increase, and you'll see that in the tuition figures that we finalize. And then finally, we've been talking about this facilities plan. I've been talking with Vern over the last couple of days around the sort of summer wish list at each of the schools. We've got some additional paving that could be done at Bakersfield. We've got cafeteria tables in Montgomery that are kind of long overdue for replacing. And then we are anticipating within the next year or 2 or 3 needing to replace boilers in Berkshire, all relatively large projects. And then we'll talk in a little bit around additional classroom space in Sheldon. In the draft that I sent you out earlier today, I have all of these as a budget line item in each school. So that would say that we're going to raise the money from taxes. We are going to get that project done sometime within FY24. You on this side, in this district, have a healthy capital reserve fund, both district-wide, and then 2 of the individual schools still have those. So as we get into the kind of horse trading of the budget in January, there's some pretty easy ways, if we're not feeling good about where this budget is, we could pull the Montgomery project out and say, you know, we still want to do that, and we're going to do that out of capital reserve funds. Berkshire as well still has capital reserve funds that we can tap, that they brought to the unification. And then we have this general one that covers the entire district. So I wanted to get those numbers in there because it's easier to go down than up as we go through this. But I don't want folks to panic on the facilities piece.
And we did just put a pretty substantial portion of what was left over from last year into the collective general.
Right, if you put 605,000 into capital reserve and 605,000 used to buy down the tax rate.
Right.
My guess right now is that you'll have about a $800,000 total to play with in that same way. So you could put another 200,000 in and keep that same dollar amount for moving
Right.
taxes. You could wait and see where equalized pupils are, and maybe you don't need to use all that to level out a tax rate, if that is
Right.
in fact a board goal.
Okay.
Next, yep. So the staffing changes have tweaked a little bit since we last met. We are now overall change to the district up about 7 FTE. It's the health teacher and the tech integrationist that are across the whole SU. We are in this budget proposing, what has changed is we've got 2 additional middle school teachers in Sheldon, an interventionist.
Can I talk through that a little bit?
Yep.
Okay. I think you meant district-wide positions for health and tech.
Correct.
In terms of Sheldon, we have some significant needs in terms of the size of their middle school. So right now, they have 4 teachers, but they have 6 groups of students. So they have only 4 classroom spaces for 6 groups of students. So we need to right-size that because the groups of students are far too large to be able to sustain this model. So what I would like to propose is that we add 2 additional middle school teachers so that we can have the same number of teachers as we do the number of groups of students. That would be really similar to the Enosburg Middle School model, and the numbers would actually be really similar to the Enosburg Middle School model. So they'd have the same level of staffing and about the same class size with this kind of a shift in model. Okay, if I just say 2 more pieces.
Yep.
The other is about support staff, so as we're shifting into Act 173, what we've been tuning into is the ratio and really looking at the level of intervention support that we have in Sheldon, and I believe that we need 2 additional professional staff members. One of those will be targeted towards providing additional intervention for students. The other is a little less clear, most likely will be intervention, but I would like some flexibility in what that position would be. Sorry. And the last piece is in order for us to right-size the middle school and create a structure that matches what the need is at Sheldon for the students, we need space. There are no additional classroom spaces. So proposing that we embed in this budget modular classroom space. There are 2 options. One would be a model that would give us exactly what we need for now, which is 2 additional classroom spaces to right-size our middle school. But what I would like to propose, because of that really positive growth trend that you just saw in the projections for enrollment, is that if you're going to do this work, that you future-proof this a little and consider a 4 classroom unit modular space, so that we also have some space where we can do some targeted intervention and specialized instruction for special education.
And Vern has been trying prices on a modular building. He's actually in Sheldon today doing some remeasuring. He found a company that seems to have buildings that work really well for a school. We have not been able to get them to give a ballpark price yet. We are working on that. I think if anyone is involved in construction projects right now, they know how quickly things are moving, and they're saying that their builders are only guaranteed prices for 7 days right now, and so he was not comfortable saying, well, the last place we built cost this. We will have something before you need to finalize a budget, again, assuming that that's something that you want to carry in your local budget. But we're still doing some digging there.
I have a question on the Bakersfield minus 0.8 FTE. Is that an intervention position, an increase in guidance? Is that where that is? That we're losing 0.8?
So I believe
FTE.
it was an intervention position that we had been holding in the budget.
That we had a whole one, but then we moved
Not filling. Right.
guidance up to full.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and since your last meeting, we've bumped up the part-time custodian position to full-time in Bakersfield. And then we've added, in this budget, we've added 2 paraeducators in Berkshire's. One of them is tied to a specific kiddo who we haven't met yet, and we may not need that person. But at this writing, we have them in the budget. And I don't think we changed anything in Montgomery.
And
since
the
last
addition
meeting.
of the health teacher that's going to be shared will free up some of the people who've been doing that health position to increase their other position, right?
Yep,
Potential.
you'll find it.
Potentially, yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So these next 2 pie graphs are almost exactly the same as they've been every year. I think they're good to include in the public-facing documents that you put out. I have updated them based on this budget. But on this one, the what we buy chart, the section of blue is basically what your staff cost you. So half of your budget is going to your people. That dark red, almost a third, are your tuition bills to other districts. And then the next biggest slice of red is other services, and that's basically what you're getting from the supervisory union. So that's all your transportation and all your special ed teachers, and some paras are part of that chunk. So we just put that up there so you can keep this in mind as we kind of go through the final stages of budget development, that the perception in our communities is that we spend a lot of money on things like pencils and books, and that's that yellow slice of the pie. And so really, if we're in a position where we are concerned about where the budget is landing, the dark red's off the table because you're obliged to pay that. It's really that blue half is where you can impact your budget. Next one. And then this is, rather than what we buy, this is what we do. And so the regular education piece is that big green swath. Special ed is that blue section, and then you've got athletics is a pretty minuscule piece, and after school is a pretty minuscule piece. And then that green section is split out, so we have things like the student support services, guidance and health, still relatively small, the buildings and grounds relatively small. It really is around your teachers who are doing direct instruction, and then those high school tuition payments. So I think that's maybe less for you folks at this point and more for your communities when we are presenting this publicly in February. So we do one more. This is the beginning of that chart that will walk you through the tax rate calculation, and this is, I think, all we'll look at tonight. So the budget that your voters approved in FY23 was 18.2 million. The one that you have in your packet is 19.9, and that is sort of where we will kind of start our discussion and decide where we need to go there. And one more. And then this is something that we haven't looked at in the past. I'll probably add it. It's the blue lines are the budgeted amounts that were passed by your voters, except for FY24, which we proposed, and then those red lines are the actual expenses. So you can kind of see how we have been tracking to the budget in the past. And then you can close that.
Was that?
Yep. We can do that. And then I may, oh no, I can't share. So what I will tell you on the yield rate, no, I can just talk them through it. So that change from 18.2 to 19.9 in terms of raw dollars, that's a 9.7% increase. If we had exactly the same revenue as we had last year, we had exactly the same equalized people as we had last year, and the dollar yield stays where the tax commissioner has put it, because of that big move in the yield, that would still be a 6-cent decrease in the tax rate. Now, we know that those numbers aren't going to stay the same. I will have a clearer picture on your revenue for your January meeting, but really there's not too much in play there anymore. You've got the small schools grant, or the merger support grant, as it's now called. And then you've got the use of your fund balance, which is that piece that you have some control over. So again, we used $605,000 last year. We have, as I said, I think it's $805,000 this year. So you could level fund that level fund your revenue and still put 200,000 towards your capital reserve.
And Morgan, can you break down of that $1.7 million increase from FY '23 to FY '24? What portion of that is the human resource, all the FTE increases across the district versus the kind of facilities cost, like is the modular classroom amount even part of that 1.7 million?
I think I put in 150,000 when I was developing this, just as a guess.
As a placeholder, but it's likely gonna
So
be
that's
quite a
okay.
bit more
It may be,
than that.
And the two Sheldon positions, the new ones are also in here?
they are.
Okay.
And
you
how about
said-
So I could-
how about the boiler, the potential like large money items at the schools, that's
Yeah.
also in
Those
there?
are in here right now.
Okay,
So if, yeah.
But did you say the tax rate is going to decrease?
If everything else stays the same, which it never does, but that, I think the point is that yield is moving pretty significantly. And so you've got, you're gonna have a lot of opportunity, assuming that we have the same number of equalized pupils, which I think we will, to take on some of these investments that have been presented without skyrocketing the tax rate. And
And
again, this
we
is
don't
the
know what
last
CLA
year
is.
of the old calculation for equalized pupils, so when we went into this budget year, when I went into this budget year, I had a bit of a bunker mentality in that, like, we just have to get through this year. The following year, when they write the calculation, we're gonna have more breathing room. Seems like the yield rate is giving us that breathing room this year.
I think the reality in the field is we can't really wait a year to do some of the things that we put into this budget because the needs of the students in our schools have grown exponentially, while at the same time, the services that we have available from outside agencies to provide supports to them has decreased substantially because of some of the staffing shortages and other things that we're contending with, so.
And if it's useful, I can, if you go back to those pie charts and the what we buy and what we're doing with it, I can give you a year-to-year comparison of those. So you could see, yeah, the cost of people is going up this much, the cost of benefits is going up this much. I can certainly do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And embedded in that increase is this pretty substantial increase in our tuition high schoolers, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite double, but it's close to it.
It's almost
Right.
40 more, right?
So,
And,
in terms of what I'm actually calculating, so this is gonna do things like start to make assumptions on how many kids are gonna go to the tech center, which
yeah,
gets calculated differently. We had 221 kids we budgeted for, 221 tuition bills we budgeted for last year. Right now, I'm at 248, so that's 27. It's 27, it's not the, whatever it was, the 40 kids that are up there, but it's still a pretty significant increase.
okay,
And no one's put out tuition rates, so I'm just assuming everyone's gonna go up 5%.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's safe. The yield letter that the commissioner puts out is based on projections by the AOE of what all of our budgets are gonna do. They did a survey and the average increase that they're coming up with was around 8.5%. And so that yield is already assuming that everyone's budget's going up 8%.
I'm just gonna say the obvious. Just because we assume that the rate is going up, the rate of spending is going up, doesn't mean we have to spend more. So we have to be really mindful, I mean, that we're asking for a lot. And I wanted to bring up, you brought it up, Morgan, the capital funds, especially the ones that Berkshire came with and the other school, I can't remember which one came with. We planned for things like the boiler in that fund, because we knew the boiler wasn't gonna last that much longer. So I feel like that's definitely something that should come out of the capital fund and not a new budget.
And I think we're trying to kind of compartmentalize some of those things and put those out there and say, here's another way to do it. And obviously, if you move beyond doing something but coming up with a different way to pay for it to getting rid of something, then we just need to have the conversation at the board levels. Okay, what is it? Is this, maybe this is not the year that we put the health teacher in there, maybe we have to punt that. Maybe it's, whatever other changes are there, but we don't want to have the conversation be tied to, we want the number to be 5%. Conversation needs to be, we don't want to do these things next year, or we want to pay for them a different way.
In regard to the 8% increase, is it fair to say that this is due to, kids are requiring more? They're requiring more from us, we're having to hire specialized staff. Coming out of a pandemic, I think socially, emotionally, kids are in worse shape than they've ever been. Is it fair to say that a large part of that ed spending increase is directly correlated to those kids and their needs?
I think some of it is, and I actually will be at a meeting, Lynn and I will be at a meeting on Friday where we have superintendents, special ed directors, and business managers who are really going to be talking a lot about that and what everybody's seeing in their individual districts. What I've heard is personnel cost, benefits is always on there, but yeah, this shift to schools doing more than they've done in the past.
Because we don't have access to those outside
Exactly.
entities as we talked about,
So
so.
that's been a big part of our conversation, is about like what schools have to take on. So when we think about this, historically, education spending has been education spending. And now we're employing social workers,
Yeah.
and we're,
Yeah.
employing board certified behavior analysts because we love our partners, in DCF and in NCSS and some of our alternative programs, but there are no spaces. And some of the programs that we had that could have been options for students in the past,
Yeah.
they don't exist anymore. So when we think about the continuum of least restrictive environment and where we would have landed in terms of what we can support in the public school 5 years ago,
Right.
it would have been here. And now we're in a place where we're managing up here in the public school, and we have 6 alternative programs that we've developed ourselves in FNE issue because there are not alternative programs for us to send kids to get the kind of specialized support they need. So we have had to take on a huge part of the mental health piece in order to contend with some of the needs of our students. So you are seeing it either directly or indirectly because you're gonna get some of those costs out of the SU budget, you're gonna get some of those costs in the high school tuition rate increases because of what we're building across all levels of organization.
So.
Do you know what our increase was last year, like the total bottom line number, like this is 1.7? I mean, this just doesn't seem like all that different from what we usually look at, so it doesn't seem like that alarming to me, but.
Certainly pull that. Three districts, I don't want to guess. Yeah, so last year, expenses were up 2.4%, and revenue was down. So that was really the first year of this bracing for the change in the special ed model. So the expenses, I think we were holding expenses down because you were losing a lot of special ed revenue at the district level. that was going to the SVU level, and so those special ed assessments were not as dramatic as they were in the past. So we cut your special ed budget actually by, it looks like $1 million. But that was part of this Act 173 shift.
So the 8% increase they're projecting FY '23, FY '24. FY '24, so they're saying there's gonna be a surplus for '23
For us.
for, as a state, in the ed funding
Yeah.
surplus, but then in FY '24,
FY '24 is just as when they went out and asked districts what their spending was gonna do, they all said it's going
Gonna
up
go
on
up
average
8%.
8%.
so your gain is no longer a gain, fast forward to '24.
So Morgan, it won't be till January until we're really locking in numbers and we'll know more of the numbers that inform where we land from the
Correct.
state by January's meeting.
Correct. So the equalized pupil number is really the last significant one that you folks need to tune into, and that by statute comes out on December 15th. It
Yeah.
doesn't always come out by December 15th. Or it's one that if they don't have all the data they need, it comes with a lot of caveats. I don't think we're anticipating a big change based on where our enrollment numbers are. And again, it'll be FY '25 that you see the benefit from the corrected calculations.
So it seems that in anticipation of January, when we're really kind of trying to kind of solidify the budget,
Mhm.
maybe it would be helpful to do a little bit of figuring out what part, to kind of dissect out some of those costs around the boiler and infrastructure costs that could potentially, and even the modular classrooms at Sheldon, if we decide to move forward with those, that could be potentially covered by general funds and capital funds that the two schools came with
Mhm.
for the projects relevant to them, to those particular buildings.
Yep.
And just so we can kind of see how that moves, that percentage increase, if we're looking at 9.7%, but that would likely pull down that increase somewhat significantly.
Yep.
So we could just see a version of each.
Yeah, I would say just doing it really quickly, if you pull the boiler and the Montgomery project, let's say, out, because they both have capital reserve funds, that's probably gonna be 1%.
Yeah,
If you pull the modular classroom out, that's probably somewhere around 1%.
Right.
So you can start to chip away at that
right.
pretty painlessly.
And that certainly illuminates what we all know and we see over and over and over again, that the biggest driver of these budgets is the human resource, salary, benefits, part of it, and our tuition kids,
Mhm.
always.
Right. And one of the things that, that we've certainly done in the past, and everybody who's been on a local board before the unified board, I think probably feels this even greater, is when you had those swings in tuition kids, once we got the tuition bills in December and then in April, you would look and say, okay, we actually have a bunch of money left over. Let's do something to the building that we've been putting off because we have this chunk of cash. It would be great to get to a point where you've done well at building up the capital reserve, but also trying to budget in the general fund for some of that. And then as we get more comfortable with that, I don't necessarily need to budget for every 8th grader because we know that 10% are gonna go to Enosburg or Richford because they have a parent there. We'll never know exactly what that number is, but we probably don't need to budget for all of them to still be accurate. we've just done it that way and then kind of shorted the construction planning because that's kind of how we lived when we were in these smaller budgets where those swings were more dramatic.
I think the other piece to just keep in mind is that decision we made last year to buy down that budget put us in the place where, I think, what did you say, 605? So it put us in that place of we had to make that 605 up in this budget to get to level, right? So we need to just remember the impact of that on this discussion as well.
And it seems to me that none of the increases in human resource FTEs across the district are superfluous. I mean, there's a serious need for this level of staffing. So just to say kind of in support of what will inevitably drive the budget up on the human resource side of it, that these are all kind of much needed staff to be in the buildings, kind of addressing the complex educational and social emotional needs that our kids have.
Right. And I would just say as an aside, we have to report on student-staff ratios in some version or another. It feels like we have to do it weekly for different things. I certainly have them for some of the grants, and the most recent one that we had to complete was for what's called Title I comparability. And so if you have Title I money going to your schools, all the schools that are same kind of need to be within this pretty narrow range of students per instructional staff to one another. And you can count different people in here, you know, to make the calculation to your advantage. And it was tough to make that work this year because of Sheldon, and they've seen an increase in kids, and so their ratio was pretty far off from some of our other schools. And so I think that for the most part, the FTE proposals that are out there are starting to correct that.
Morgan, do we have any comparable data from pre-pandemic, what we spent to outside organizations and under contract, and what we're spending now post-pandemic inside the SU to provide those types of services for students?
What types of services? Think like cat workers and things like
Yeah,
that?
exactly.
Alternative placements, contracts like that.
Yeah, so, I know we used to spend a lot on, services from outside organizations, but now you're saying we're doing much more of it in-house, so that might be a graphic that the public would like to look at, that, you know, instead of, sourcing it out, we're trying to make do on our own, and this is what we're spending in comparison to before. And yes, I understand the need is greater, there are more students needing right now, but maybe if you could do it on a percentage basis or just apples to apples.
Is it more expensive though when we have to hire people because then you have all their benefits and everything too? Versus when we were able to.
I
I'm
do
trying
not
to
think,
get
I
at,
do not think it's more expensive.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think it's less expensive. Just transportation for some of those, and we had $58,000, I think, for one of the transportation contracts for one student for one of the alternate placements. So I think that we're doing it because we have to, but at the same time, we can be more efficient in terms of cost. I think that's an excellent point, Lisa.
I'd like to see that.
To see that.
I think the, our communities would like to see exactly what good stewards of their money we're being or trying to be. I mean, even if we're gonna have a 9% increase in the budget, I feel like we need to justify that we're doing everything we can to keep it down as much as we can.
I think along with what Lisa said, we need to compare how many students were being served outside and how many are being served inside now.
Or just total number of students needing
Right,
services prior to the
Yes.
pandemic and now total number after
Yeah.
needing those types of intensive services. That would be interesting to see as well.
I don't have that data, so I don't wanna speak for that data's existence.
Maybe able to get at some of that, I think
Yeah.
I can work with Michelle DeBerge on some of that. In terms of identifying the number of students now, I think we'd have to define, what do we mean by that? Being served in our alternative programs, being served with more intensive supports in classrooms, because we definitely have shifted to having behavior interventionists.
Yeah, so how many students are driving the need to hire new personnel or to contract with an outside agency of some kind, or to create an alternative program within our system for those students? Because all of those are kind of new things that we're being told over and over and over again, that social emotional learning is the biggest thing, behavior is the biggest thing right now, it's the biggest driver of needing more personnel. So that would justify to me, and I'm sure to some of our community members, that we're spending this money because there is an absolute need. We can hear it, but to see it in black and white, I think would be
Yeah.
powerful.
I'll have to think about the how part of that, because
Well, yeah, you
we've
don't
got
want to
numbers of
identify.
capacity,
Yeah.
and like, we have more students that could be served with that level of intervention than we have space to
Mhm.
serve. So when we're saying about like number of students driving, I think I can give you capacity, and I'd have to think about that with
Okay,
Michelle. about how we
that's,
can
yeah, that's
communicate it.
fine.
Could you look at, just compare year over year number of kids on 504s, for instance, just to give you that really broad sense of how many kids are on these specific plans? It's not gonna get to like real nitty gritty, but it lets you know that this level of need has been documented and this is how it's changed over the years.
That's gonna be harder to get,
Really?
because we
Okay.
didn't have a centralized system
Oh,
to
okay.
track that data. We do now.
Oh, okay.
With EduClimber,
Hmm.
but I can't give you historical data
Gotcha.
for that. It was housed at each individual school, so I can give you that moving forward
Lovely.
this year too, and beyond, but.
I think just, for people who don't live in Sheldon, maybe just to understand the level of need in our collective communities,
Mhm.
why we're hiring so many new personnel.
Mhm.
Because that seems to be the biggest driver of the budget besides high
Mhm.
school tuition.
So I think I could create a visual that could represent, what if we look at class sizes, for example, and the number of teachers teaching in our schools. I think that it's pretty easy to see when you look at it that way, that we don't have enough, if we don't want classes of 30 in our middle school, which is challenging, then they need to be split. And if they're going to be split, then we need 2 additional teachers to write that. So I think visually we could represent that in such a way, and I think that the Title I comparability data in terms of the ratios is something that we could look at, and make that more visible to you in terms of, it's the growth in Sheldon that's also adding additional pressure.
Mhm.
So writing that level of intervention support is also going to be important because of their growth. We were good, and then we weren't able to refill some positions, and now we've got the population growth to contend with, so we can work on that.
And I would also say that you don't want to kind of give ground on the argument that that this budget proposes a huge increase in FTE. It's less than 2 per building, and that's at a time when we're struggling with additional needs, this right sizing that we're talking about in Sheldon, and also I think as a unified system now coming together and saying, okay, we can actually do things like this health teacher that really is only costing each building a little bit, but it's giving a pretty big bang for the buck.
And that's something that we should have had a while ago. So we need to write that piece too.
The last piece that I'll just tip, since I'm throwing out the, if everything was the same, the tax rate would be this. The one other thing that's not gonna be the same is the CLA, and that affects each of the towns differently. And that number comes in sometime between Christmas and New Year's usually. So we should have that by our January meeting. It's something to keep in the back of your mind, but it's definitely a number that you as the board should try not to own because it has nothing to do with you.
And so it seems like to me the general consensus I'm hearing is that we are understanding the need to embed in this budget that we're gonna try to solidify in January, these FTE increases in our staffing across the district. And I haven't heard anyone suggest they're not open to the modular classroom potential or the bigger ticket facilities cost, but maybe some interest in seeing how does that look if it's covered partially or fully under capital reserve fund and the collective capital reserve that we have now as well.
Yep. And I can have that ready to go in January.
Okay.
We can pull those out pretty
Okay,
easily.
great. All right, any other questions for Morgan on that?
And so you want to see an increase year to year by those different categories, some sort of graphic to get at the change in spending with outside agencies. I will try to get a handle on the 8th to 9th grade loss for tuition kids, like how many of those you don't actually end up having to pay in a given year, and see if that's at all consistent from year to year.
Great. Sounds like a good plan. All right.
Can I just ask, are we concept-wise, are you okay with us moving forward with the exploration of the modular classroom space for Sheldon? We're not gonna spend any money, but
Right, of course.
if there's enough consensus that it at this point seems to be something that the board would support, we'll invest more of our time in the, doing more work of looking at the site and, digging deeper into the associated costs with both the 2-classroom and the 4-classroom
Right.
options.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems necessary that they're bursting at the seams there and there's not enough space. So it seems warranted, and if you could break it down cost-wise
Okay.
between the 2 and the 4 and what that would look like, I think that'd be really helpful.
Perfect. Great, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Morgan. So we'll go to our principals to do reports. Lenny, anything that you, oh, sorry, actually, I'm gonna start with Rhoda, apologies.
You can go first.
It's easier for me to follow my order.
That's
yeah.
fine.
You're in the hot seat. Any thing you'd like to highlight or add to your report, Rhoda?
I thought I would just highlight the Paw Prints newsletters that go out. It's been kind of neat to see the teacher piece of this. We've always, we've had this newsletter for a long time, but new this year is the piece where there's 2 teachers a week who are writing just little blurbs about what they've been doing with their kids. And so that's been neat for the community to see, and also, the parents like to have that piece knowing exactly what's going on, right? So that's been well received. And then just an update on the cameras. They were there today, putting in our new cameras, so there's a little bit more work to do next week. They're coming back, but most of it's set already, so it's good to see those things happening.
All right, now you're up, Lenny.
So this wasn't in the board notes, but it's not a big surprise. Let's give me a look. It's not a big surprise. This is a fun surprise. I received,
This is Lenny.
I promise, I received
That kinda
a
terrifies me,
tip
I'm not gonna
that
lie.
there was an individual who refers themselves as a snowflake bandit that was going to be visiting our school and flaking classrooms, and it seems many of our classrooms have been flaked. They come into their classroom, and there's different sets of snowflake designs and saying, "You've been flaked, I will come back again." I'm working really hard to find out who the snowflake bandit is. Students have some suspicions. At one point, they thought it must be Mr. Bose that's doing it because it has to be somebody inside the school. I'm like, I don't know, we're gonna check the cameras and look at it. He has some white paint in his office, so they thought that was what he was using, but then we figured out, no, it's actually, this is shaving cream that was used. So students in different grades, when they've been flaked, are spending a lot of time and effort trying to think deeply about who it could be and who it couldn't be, and you might get named as a suspect at some point. So if you've got people mentioning that there's a snowflake bandit that's terrorizing our school and spreading some holiday cheer, just know that I'm on it and we're looking into it. I told you that was gonna be an okay surprise.
Lenny, that was a good surprise.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
But I didn't have it in the notes because it came to me right when we came back from break. I was like, all right, I'll share this with the school and I'll remember to let you guys know.
Okay, thank you, Lenny. Sandy, anything from you tonight?
I have a couple of notes. I kind of wanted to highlight how amazing our 8th grade parents are doing with their Washington DC fundraising. They are just going to town. And it seems like every single thing they do raises $1,000, so they're just on a roll. But what really cracked me up was the bottle drive, because they had the bottle drive, it's the Berkshire Redemption that usually comes and empties our bottle bin. They brought trailers into the parking lot, and it was advertised, well advertised, for 2 days over the weekend. And we got $1,100 in bottles, so I couldn't believe we had $1,100 from bottles. And people just drove in and dropped them off.
And they offered to come pick them up
Yes,
too, which
yep.
was a nice
Yep.
offering.
Yeah, that was a couple parents that had decided that that was a good idea, and so it's different parents doing different things, it's not just one group. These were 2 different parents that had this idea, they grabbed the ball, ran with it, and it was pretty cool. I mean, so simple. And it cleaned out everybody's garages. So, having fun with it. And then our Penny Palooza, which is our, we try to take care of some families in need during the holiday season. And our Penny Palooza is literally kids running up and down the hallways, not running, power walking. And the goal is to have the most pennies. So the class that gets the most pennies wins a pizza party. But any dollar bills or change, silver change, negates the pennies, so, you know, you can have plenty. So most of the pennies are negative numbers because there's so much money that comes in. $1,500 in a week
Wow.
is how much that Penny Palooza just raised.
Wow.
And that's kids going in and out of classrooms and dumping change. They sabotage the other classrooms, and Susie has her blow-up hammer and hits kids, and they think it's so much fun, so they run down to her room and dump the money in her room, sabotage her, so they can get hit with a hammer. It's just so much fun. So I think we need to do like a Monday morning mingle once a month where the kids can just walk up and down the halls and socialize with each other. Anyway, it's been lots of fun, lots of energy.
Nice, thanks, Sandy. Lynn, do you want to share anything from Lisa's?
I mean, I can share that Lisa DeLorme submitted the principal's report this month. She was really introducing herself to the board as someone who is filling in there. As you can see from the action you took after the executive, Mrs. Ox has resigned, and Mrs. DeLorme and Lisa DeLorme and Julie Van Wyk, oh my goodness, Julie Benet, I just said that wrong. Lisa DeLorme and Julie Benet will be co-acting principals for the remainder of the year. Although it's not ideal to have a leadership change mid-year, we have 2 really strong veteran administrators who are going to take the helm at Sheldon, and I'm confident that they can provide some stability and to help create some opportunities for students and be supportive of some system growth with the staff at Sheldon as well. I see some really good things happening there. There's a really strong commitment from the staff to chip in and work on improving the school community, and I see a lot of good things happening. I'm excited I get to fill in next Tuesday as their acting principal, and I'll be present for the first concert since pre-pandemic, so I'm excited to be there to see that.
Great. Thank you, that's great. So we're now at our board business. Anyone have any future, what's that? Oh, I'm gonna go back to you now, okay. I thought all we were gonna do was the executive.
I have other stuff that I.
Oh,
need to
okay,
tell you.
all right, I'm gonna jump to Lynn then first.
So I have just a couple of things under mine, and then we will have an executive. Under personnel, I have, Courtney's gonna put the report up on the board. Just a couple of changes since I released this to you in your board packet. So you can see that we hired a paraeducator in Bakersfield, that information is up there. We have had a few resignations since our last meeting, so in Bakersfield, we lost one of our PTs. In Sheldon, we lost a paraeducator who resigned from last time, and we had Brian Rainville, who has resigned. He is fifth grade teacher in Sheldon. He's gonna resign effective December 22nd, and Jessica Ox, the principal of Sheldon, has resigned. You took action on Jessica, but you have not taken action on Brian. So I ask the board to make a motion to accept Brian's resignation effective December 22nd, 22.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Emily. We'll do that by roll. Erin?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
Kat?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
John? And Mary is an aye.
So we have, in our master agreement, we have a December 1st deadline for notification if people intend to retire at the end of the school year. They can, of course, let us know later than that, but in order to be eligible for the retirement benefit that's in the master agreement, they have to let us know by December 1st. And we have no employees that notified us of a retirement at the end of the school year. We still have open positions that we're looking to fill across the district. In Bakersfield, we still have an interventionist, math and literacy interventionist, and a grade 2 position open. Berkshire still has a paraeducator position. Sheldon has a paraeducator position. We no longer have that grade 5 position. Could you go to the next slide? Thank you. There are some salary advancements for our staff, and this, I think, is all of them. It's possible that I have missed a couple, so if I did, I'll include those in the January report. This was written right after those were due. Those were also due by December 1st, so Morgan has all of that information for budget purposes. So you can see the moves there. And then I will need, at the end, to go into executive session to discuss personnel. That's all I have, Mary.
Great, thanks, Lynn. All right, so now we're truly in the
Hold on.
board business.
Sorry, I did have
Oh,
one other
no.
support. I thought that was my last piece, but I
Okay.
guess I didn't turn my
Right.
own page
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
So we had a plan to open a Sheldon principal search from the start because Mrs. Ox was filling an interim position. So we had originally, when we thought about our timeline, we were going to post late in the holiday break and try to get us started in early January. I have changed my thinking on that, and I want to get that posted effective tomorrow, and then bring back a revised timeline to you. Your meeting is early in January, I believe it's the 4th in January, so I'll have a revised timeline that'll go out to you electronically in advance of that meeting, and then I'll ask you to give me feedback on the structure and if there are changes that you want to make in terms of how we're engaging community involvement, staff involvement in that hiring process. So we'll have something for you to look at on January 4th, and I hope to be able to move really quickly through that hiring process because it is a competitive market out there, and we're hoping to get a really solid candidate for Sheldon. Does that make sense? Have any questions on that? Now I'm really done. I'm sorry.
no, all good, all good. Anyone have any future agenda items they would like to mention now? There's always time later. Our next meeting will be January 4th. The SU board report, I think the big highlights from that last board meeting were the 2 spotlights that we had. Michelle Irish did a really excellent spotlight on youth-adult partnership, why it matters, kind of the arc of kind of developing these partnerships with young folks in the schools, what some activities from past June she highlighted, and then also, I don't know if anyone got the agenda from the last SU meeting, but if you go to Michelle's presentation, it's a slideshow, it's not too long, and it's really worth taking a look at. There was a great youth partnership video, youth-adult partnership video that she shared, which was really compelling. It wasn't specific to our kids in these communities. It was, I think, coming from California, but that's worth clicking on and taking, watching that 5-minute video. And then she just highlighted kind of what some activities from the fall, where there was an event here at Enosburg, interrupting hateful language, and then another group discussion of supporting our LGBTQIA and other identities, people within our school community, and that was really interesting to hear about that. And then I'd say the other big spotlight was Jody Valancourt brought the three instructional coaches, Marty, Leslie, and Amber, and each of them talked a little bit about the instructional coaching program and how it's working across the SU, especially when we have so many, I believe 59 new professional staff members. So the kind of engaging all of our new professional staff members with these really veteran, experienced teachers, and why it's so critical that we're doing this work, and some of the successes that they're already starting to hear about and see kind of in daily practice as our new teachers and new staff members become more kind of confident in how they are practicing their within the schools and working with kids. So those were the 2 significant spotlights from that SU meeting. And then again, you can link over from the agenda to see each director's personal kind of update from the tech side of things, and so on and so forth. Anything that you'd like to add about the SU? We also doing budget, so similar process.
The one thing I'll add, and I don't think you said anything about the central office.
The move, yeah, Lynn
We've
can
moved
speak
into
to
our
that.
new space. Pretty happy, we're right over there. We moved on, about half of our office moved on November 4th. And about a week later, the rest of our business office moved. They had to stay put so that they could run personnel for that, or run payroll for that week. So we're all there. Most of our space is done. There's still construction kind of going on around us on some of the remaining work. There is a second phase to this project that gives us 4 additional office spaces in our conference room. So for now, it does not look like we're fully moved in because we have 4 offices full of stuff in our conference room that are kind of in our space, and we're waiting for that addition to be done. I think 4 months, is that right, Morgan, is the target that we think will be fully done in 4 months, but we're already feeling it. I've driven from central office out to each of our schools, and it has been so refreshing because no school is more than 15 minutes away, and I had to be in Sheldon yesterday for something, and I thought as I was leaving, I want to check the time, it was like 13 minutes. Hopefully I wasn't speeding, but it was 13 minutes to get there, which was great. Not speeding, I always try to speed. But it's really, it feels like a game changer for those of us who are out in schools, that we can go to a school and find our way right back to the office within 15 minutes. When you have to make the decision about, well, am I gonna go back to the office, that's a half an hour, and then I'm gonna have to backtrack the 15 minutes to get to the next meeting, sometimes you don't make the decision to go back. You find another place to work, and it's just really nice to be able to go back to our own spaces, and it's just, I feel like it's gonna make a big difference in terms of our efficiencies, those of us that spend a lot of time in schools. So I went to Lenny today, and that was just a quick pop over to Berkshire and back, so we're excited.
Great. So, anything else for the public part of the meeting? All right, so I'm gonna make a motion to enter executive session. It's 8:30. This is to discuss personnel-related issues. And I think we can let our principals go for sure.
Morgan.
Yeah, we'll keep Morgan. All right, great. We are exiting executive with no motion pending. It's 9:18. And I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn unless there's further discussion on anything. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
I
Don't forget Aaron.
And Aaron, yes, thank you. All right, thanks all, really appreciate it. See you next month.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.